Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the 24th episode of Good Timin. As always on this podcast, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And on today's show, we are going to be covering an album that hasn't really received a lot of praise from critics over the years, but it's one that many hardcore Beach Boys fans seem to really appreciate and enjoy. And I personally feel that it's one of the more underrated records in the band's discography. Of course, the album that I'm referring to is the group's 1979 release, the LA Light album. And as we've done on our previous album episodes, we're going to be discussing the album's history and background and how it came together. We'll also do a track-by-track rundown of the album and share our thoughts on each of the individual songs. And then towards the end of the episode, we're also going to be covering some of the outtakes and extra material from around the time as well. Also, in addition to all of this, my co-host Riley recently had the opportunity to interview Geoffrey Cushing-Murray, who co-wrote several of the songs featured on LA, including Full Sail, Angel Come Home, and Going South. So we'll be including some of his thoughts and comments on those tracks throughout our episode, which I think that'll be pretty interesting to hear. We will also provide a link in the description of this episode to the full interview with Geoffrey for any of you who are interested in checking it out. So joining me for today's episode, I have my usual crew of Riley, Justin, and Matt. Nate may be joining us later on, hopefully. As always, I'm glad to have you guys here, and I'm looking forward to discussing this often overlooked album with you all. Before we dive into the history of the LA Light album, do any of you guys want to quickly share some of your general thoughts and opinions on the record?
Yeah. This one was kind of a slow grower for me at first. I really liked Good Timin. And then I liked Lady Linda. And then I kind of get into the Carl and Dennis tracks. I think those are really the highlights for me. But I don't think there's a really real bad song on this album, except one. But as far as I know, it doesn't really exist. So I don't think there really is a bad song in this album. I see it as not necessarily kind of a return to form after the whole, I guess, kind of the nostalgia albums. I guess even though Love You isn't really a nostalgia album, I guess, but the Brian's Back era is kind of a return to form to Holland in some ways. It's very Carl and Dennis heavy, especially Carl heavy. But I really like this one. I think it's great.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. I definitely think, Jake, you said it best, where it's like it's somewhat underrated. I think some of these critic reviews, just looking at them now, are a bit harsh. I mean, AllMusic said it was the worst album of their career. No, it's not. I really just think, though, that one bad song that Riley mentioned, which I know we'll get into, I think it honestly kind of overshadowed the rest of the record for most critics. And I think they just kind of based the whole review off that one song. And yes, that one song is not very good, but it's one song. Albeit it's very long. It's like about a quarter of the runtime. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, for me, this was one of those albums that I read about for years and years before I actually listened to it. A lot of critics basically bashed it and said it was terrible. So I was kind of expecting it to be pretty bad when I first heard it, and I was actually pleasantly surprised because there are a lot of great tracks on this album, and it is very Carl and Dennis heavy, which is what I actually prefer myself, and Brian heavy too, but he's not actually on this album. But yeah, it's kind of a hodgepodge of like older songs and newer songs, and it somehow works apart from that one track that everybody's talking about. But yeah, I'd say it's probably one of the last great Beach Boys albums in my opinion.
Yeah. For me, it's definitely been a grower, kind of like Holland, which I know some people have compared this album to as well. Yeah, I just feel like initially, like I liked a few songs. Remember, like I've always liked Good Timin'. I thought that was a great song, and like Lady Linda as well. But after repeated listening, I've really started to appreciate the majority of the tracks on this album. I think it's really solid for the most part. I think it's pretty consistent. And I totally agree with Matt. I think some of these critics are just super, super harsh on some of these like late 70s albums from them. And again, are they perfect? No, most of them aren't. But they have a lot of really nice moments. And as Justin mentioned, this album has a lot of Carl and Dennis contributions to it. And I think that they have some really great songs that they contributed. I think it's a really solid album. I do think it's an improvement on MIU. Even though I do kind of rank them similarly personally, I do think that the highs in here are probably higher than the highs in MIU. I'm really looking forward to discussing this album. So it'll be fun. So now, before we get into some of the specific details behind the recording of LA, I thought it would be good to first provide some general facts and background about the album, in case any of our listeners aren't super familiar with the record. So the LA Light album was released on March 16th, 1979, and was the band's 23rd studio album. It was also their first album for CBS Records. But previously, they'd been recording for Warner Reprise, so this was their first album with the new label. Most of the album's tracks were recorded throughout 1978 at various studios in LA and Miami. Sessions wrapped up around January of 1979. One notable thing about this album is that it's essentially a collection of solo songs. As I'm sure a lot of our listeners know, there was still a lot of drama and conflict going on within the band at this time. So several of the members had kind of gone off to work on their own individual projects. So you had both Dennis and Mike contributing songs that were intended to be on solo records from each of them that never really materialized. Carl's songs on this album were written separately from the band with Geoffrey Cushing-Murray, as we mentioned earlier. And then some of the other tracks on the album, like Good Timin and Shortening Bread, had first been worked on years prior to the release of LA. And then, of course, another notable thing about this album is that it marked the return of Bruce Johnston to the band. He, of course, took the role of producer, and this was after the band realized that Brian was not going to be up for the task himself. Both Bruce and Carl were pretty much responsible for getting LA complete, since the other members weren't always around at this time. So they ended up having to record a lot of the backing vocals and harmonies throughout the album themselves, which I'm sure Justin will get into that later. Of course, it should also be mentioned that shortly after the album's release, Bruce returned to regularly touring as a Beach Boy again, and he's been with the band ever since. So in terms of the music on LA, I would say a lot of the material could be considered soft rock or yacht rock. There's definitely a couple of exceptions to that, which we'll get to later. But for the most part, I would say it kind of has that typical late 70s kind of yacht rock sound. Because a lot of these tracks were written separately by different members, I think you could definitely make an argument that LA isn't really the most cohesive album in terms of its sound. But personally, I actually do feel that it holds together pretty well given the circumstances. And there's honestly not too many songs on this record that I don't like. I think for the most part, a lot of the songs are really enjoyable and have good melodies and production. Although, again, I could also see how somebody that's not into that late 70s soft rock sound might not care for this album because that is kind of prevalent throughout the record. Commercially, LA didn't do all that great. It peaked at number 100 in the US and number 32 in the UK. Although several of the album's singles actually did chart pretty decently, particularly in the UK. And as I mentioned earlier, the album mostly received mixed to negative reviews from critics, although that criticism has seemed to soften a bit over time. So hopefully that was a solid enough introduction for those of our listeners who aren't too familiar with LA. But now to get into some more about the album's recording history and background, I'm going to hand it over to Justin. So Justin, do you kind of want to talk about how LA came together and some of the conflict that was going on within the band around that time?
Yeah. So it actually started, the first sessions for this album started at the Bee Gees studio in Criteria, which was in Miami, Florida. That was on August 28th, and they started work on 3 different songs. This was kind of like it was going to be the first record for CBS. It was like a huge deal at the time. They had a lot of money invested in this deal. They couldn't really screw it up too bad. Like it had to be like a really great album at this point. They were already behind on delivering their album to CBS as well too. So the pressure was on for Brian to really come up with some good material and get the guys in the studio and get the songs cranked out like really fast. So they ended up going to Criteria Studios, and they thought maybe because of the Bee Gees success at that time with the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, that kind of stuff, that maybe it kind of rub off on them. They did 3 different songs. They did California Feeling, Calendar Girl, which was a cover of the Neil Sedaka song, and then a song marked as Song X, which ended up being Brian's back. I guess it was just the backing track they worked on that day, the first day. So they ended up working at Criteria until September 1st. So it was about like 4 or 5 days. And then it was around this time that Walter Yetnikoff, the president of CBS, came in to kind of hear the progress of what they've been doing thus far. They did a lot of recording at this point. Like it wasn't like they were slacking off or anything. They got through quite a few songs, and quite a bit was done. But he heard the progress thus far, and he kind of said his infamous comment that everybody has quoted over the years, that he's been fucked, basically. So then around this time, because of that, either because of Brian knows like he's kind of a shadow of his former self at this point, he put in a call to Bruce Johnston to come help with the album, particularly with the vocals. I know Brian was really self-conscious, especially about his high voice at this point, and he couldn't hit the notes that he used to be able to hit. And he thought that bringing Bruce back in would he'd be able to do that. So they end up meeting back with Bruce when they go back to California, and they started working at Western Studios again. So that was kind of a way to get Brian back in the fold and to get him comfortable because he was kind of familiar with that studio in the 60s and that kind of thing. In between that, actually, I should say, before they went back to Western Studios, they played a string of shows from September 1st to 4th with Jan and Dean. It was just like a short kind of tour. So when they went to Western with Bruce, they worked on a few different songs. They started up Full Sail, Going South, Angel Come Home, and they continued work on Short and Bread. This is, I believe, it's the same tape that they used over and over throughout the 70s. They just kind of replace things and fix things and until October 12th. And then September 25th was when MIU was released. So MIU is kind of released at the same time that they're going through all this recording as well too. So then on October 12th is kind of like the turning point. This is when Bruce kind of gets this idea to record this disco version of Here Comes the Night, which was a song on Wild Honey. So October 12th, 1978 was the day that the first notes were put in for the backing track of the disco version of Here Comes the Night. And they started at Sounds Good Recording Studios. And this was kind of a project that they worked throughout the rest of the year at Sounds Good. Like it was mostly recorded there, that specific song. Further work continued until October 16th on the backing track of the different sessions, and 18 different sessions working on the Here Comes the Night vocals. Like this was a huge amount of time was put into this specific song versus the other songs. Like it's not even comparable. These 18 sessions for vocals, they stretched to the end of the year at Sounds Good Recording, Waves Mobile Studio, Sound Arts, and Studio 55. So they did these all in like different studios. October 27th to 29th, they play 4 shows, just in between recording, I guess. And Bruce joined them for the October 28th show at Notre Dame University. He was lecturing at Purdue, actually, at the time. That's why he joined them. He had not rejoined them, the touring group, as of yet. He was just kind of recording with them and kind of helping them out. He wasn't really part of the Beach Boys at this point. During November to December of 1978, Mike simultaneously recorded 2 albums with 2 different producers. Paul, I'm not sure how to say his last name, Furso on First Love, and Al Perkins on Country Love. I think, as I mentioned in the last episode too, Al Perkins was working with Michael Nesmith at the time. He was Michael Nesmith's guitar player, so that was kind of an interesting connection. And Paul Furso was part of Celebration, so that's how they were kind of connected. So now we're into 1979. Most of the work of the album is done. They're kind of just doing overdubs at this point, just doing like quick fixes. But then you have 2 more sessions for Here Comes the Night at Studio 55 and Devonshire Sound in January 1979. So a lot of time spent on that song, a lot of time. February 13th, when it finally comes out, Here Comes the Night. Back with February 21st is when the Celebration album was released on Pacific Arts Records. Again, that was the connection with Michael Nesmith. That was his record company at the time. This was recorded at MIU, as we mentioned in the last album episode, the Celebration album. March 1st to 4th were the Radio City Music Hall shows. I think these are kind of infamous for being kind of their first shows after they kind of completed this album, and they performed the disco Here Comes the Night at these shows. These were the only 4 shows that they ever performed it at. Brian was only at the first show, and he missed the other 3 shows. March 16th was when the LA Light album was released. And then a couple of things after that probably some of you guys have seen. March 25th, they were on the Easter Seals Telethon. There's kind of a video on YouTube of them playing 3 or 4 different songs. And this is when Bruce rejoined the touring band. And he's kind of lost at this point because they have some other musicians that they already paid for contracts at this point. Like you have Carly Munoz playing keyboards. You have Phil Chanel playing keyboards. You have Sterling Smith playing keyboards. So there's not really any room for Bruce. It's kind of awkward. So he plays guitar actually on this specific show. I don't know if it's actually plugged in, but then you have Ed Carter, Bobby Figueroa as well too in the band, but no Dennis for the specific show. And then there's also the Midnight Special performance, which was on April 27th, which was right after the album was released. And then you have Bruce and Brian kind of switching out keyboards depending on the song. So Brian's not playing on any of the newer songs, and that's when Bruce kind of steps in and plays the Wurlitzer on those songs. So I thought that was kind of interesting, seeing how Bruce kind of found his way back into the band and finding his role again.
Justin, a couple of questions. I was wondering, when was the concert when Dennis attacked Mike on stage? Was that after LA had been released, or was that before?
Yeah, that was after.
Okay. And then the other thing, I think I read somewhere, I thought this was interesting, but it said that like the band, even though like they had signed this big deal with CBS, I kind of read that they weren't really like in a big rush to like get an album out because they were already making so much money off of just touring and these like greatest hits compilations that were coming out left and right. They really weren't in a rush from what I read.
So they were headed.
Yeah, I think the pressure was on Bruce though, like to actually come up with something. Especially like when they brought him on board. I think that was part of the reason why they did bring him on board, to kind of make him responsible, to kind of go through the tape library and like find shit to basically put out. And that's what they did. They found a lot of stuff. Like you have, I did the breakdown here of, you have the 2 tracks from Bamboo, right? Love Surrounds Me, which Geoffrey Cushing-Murray actually wrote lyrics to. That was kind of a backing track that was started during Bamboo, and Baby Blue. And then you have the 1974 things, which was the Good Timin, which was pretty much done. Like there was a few more overdubs that they did in 79. And then Angel Come Home started off as a backing track in 1974. And that was something that, again, Geoffrey Cushing-Murray wrote the lyrics to that in 79. Then we have Lady Linda, which had been worked on since 1977. Like that was like 2 years in the making, that song. And then Short and Bread, God knows how long that was worked on, like since 1972.
Yeah.
Basically.
Wasn't that the one that Brian was like playing Alice Cooper like crazy? It was like Short and Bread.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Sumahama, that was from Mike's First Love. They re-recorded it, but it was still like a song that had already existed. So then we have Full Sail and Going South is basically the only brand new tracks, and then a remake of Here Comes the Night. So it's like the pressure was on Bruce to kind of cobble this all together, have it sound somewhat coherent or cohesive and coherent, and basically get it out in the stores by 1979.
Yeah, that's a tough ask, especially like, I'm reading this quote on Wikipedia where it's saying like the problem with this album that it had was that it's like Dennis's fans hated disco and thought Mike's songs were silly. Mike fans thought Dennis's voice was awful and found his songs too depressing. Brian's fans wanted more Brian. And it's basically saying they had to sell a product that it was hard to appeal to a large crowd.
I think also this album, like a lot of other artists that have had long careers or discographies, kind of gets buried because it is towards the end and towards like a period of where they didn't have a lot of success with their newer music. I know a lot of older like bands that have gone on for like 20, 30 years. This is something that happens with all of them, where it's just like after a certain time, people just stop listening to the records because there's so many of them.
You can't stay on top forever. You can sure as hell, you could try, but it's forever. What goes up must come down.
All right, do we want to get into the track by track rundown, guys?
Yes, let's.
All right. So side 1, the first track of the LA Light album is Good Timin'. So this song, I think as Justin mentioned, this song was actually recorded a few years prior, actually quite a few years prior. I believe it was like 1974 at Caribou Ranch. This song was also released as a single, and I think it was a great choice for a single. I think it's a really great song. I think it's one of the highlights of the album. Obviously, it's the name of this podcast as well, so we have to like it at least somewhat. Carl delivers a really great lead on this. I think it's a beautiful vocal. I also love the harpsichord in this song, which I think Brian plays. This is actually, I think, one of the few songs on this album that Brian is actually really featured at all. I think it's one of only like 2 or 3 songs where like Brian is actually contributing vocals or instrumentation. Something interesting that I learned about this song was that it actually was at one point possibly was considered for inclusion on 15 Big Ones, which would have been interesting for sure. But I think it's a great song, and I listen to it a lot. It's one of my favorites from LA. So what do you guys think of Good Timin'?
Yeah, it's a great cut. It's very catchy. It's a nice vibe. It's a very chill vibe, and I can definitely see why they said this was rushed out as a single after what happened with the song that shall not be named yet, but we'll get to it later. But yeah, it's a really nice song. It's kind of very vintage sounding, which makes it appealing, and then I really enjoy it, and I think it's a good way to start off the album. I will say that the single art is kind of ugly, but that's another topic.
I think it's very classic Beach Boys. Very much a return to form to their like old style harmonies. But that doesn't take away from it. I think it's a very great song, and it is kind of brought up to date with some of the production. I kind of feel like production wise, it could have also fit on MIU, even though it wasn't fully finished by then. But I think it's just a great song. Carl is a great vocal, and it's a very rare case of Carl and Brian collaborating on a track, and I really wish we got more of that. But I think it's a great song, and pretty much everything Matt said. It's just a great way to open the album.
Yeah, for me, this is also a great song. Like Riley said, it is a return to form for the band. They sound like the Beach Boys again, even though the background vocals are mostly just Carl and Bruce. It does sound like them, and you can hear Brian pounding away on the piano there, and the harpsichord is a very nice touch. That's something that you really hadn't heard on a Beach Boys record since about the mid '60s. So, or sorry, 1967 or so, probably with the Smile stuff. But yeah, it's also of the time. It's also of the late 1970s. There's that nice Fender Rhodes, twinkling Fender Rhodes at the beginning that Bruce plays. And yeah, I think it's a very strong track to open this album.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention this song actually chart wise did pretty solidly considering how like poorly some of their previous singles up to this point had done. It reached top 40 in the US, so that's pretty respectable showing. And it was also number 12 on the adult contemporary chart. So definitely a solid effort for sure. And I can see why it was a minor hit. I think it does fit in well with the times while still having that kind of classic Beach Boys sound. So I totally agree. Also, wrote down, Matt, I wanted to mention the single sleeve cover as well. I think it's a stupid cover. I don't know what that's about with the dancing dogs, but
I just checked Discogs, and it seemed like it was just Germany and Netherlands. Okay, you can go, Riley.
Actually, Nate wants to go.
oh, Nate's here. I didn't Go ahead, Nate.
That I think Bruce's vocal arrangement on this song is probably one of the best vocal arrangements he did for the group, and I love his keyboard part too. Such a great tune.
All right, so we'll move on to the second track on LA. And this is Lady Linda. So this song was written by Al Jardine and Ron Altbach, who of course was a touring member at the time, also formerly in King Harvest. So this song is based on a classical Bach composition, and the harpsichord intro is pretty much like directly from that. I really love this song a lot. I think it's a great tune. I think melodically it's really strong. It's also nice that it was like dedicated to Al's wife at the time, Linda. I really just love the production on this song. I think it sounds great. I love the strings, the use of the harpsichord again. It just sounds really great. And I also love that little ending part where they're like, "Ooh, lady, won't you lie, lady, won't you?" That I absolutely love that. I think it's a great vocal arrangement there. It should also be mentioned that this song did really, really good in the UK. It went top 10 on the charts there, which was a huge deal. Obviously the band at this point was still usually selling better in the UK than they were in the US, but still to get a single that high at this point was still a really big deal for them. I wasn't going to mention it, but I feel like it should be said that later on, a few years later, this song was re-recorded under the name Lady Liberty, which I think was diabolical. So I'll just leave it at that. So do you guys have any thoughts on Lady Linda?
Yeah, it's nice as Lady Linda. We're not gonna say much about the other thing, but I kind of can see why this was a big hit in the UK. I don't know, it just seems more up their alley. Do we know which Bach composition this? Oh, I found it. Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring.
Just
I probably
definitely
pronounced
butchered French
butchered
or German
with
or
that.
whatever language.
But okay, yeah, no, it's a really pretty song. I like it. It's a nice song.
This one was a pretty slow grower on me because I think when I was first getting into the band, I was like, "Oh, Lady Linda reached number 3 in the UK. It's gotta be good." And then when I first heard the, I just turned it off immediately. And then kind of similarly to Beaks of Eagles, when I learned this is a very Al thing, I kind of returned to it. I'm like, "Oh, this shit rips." It's such a great song. He reuses the melody in a very smart way, especially compared to some of his other examples of borrowing a melody. I mean, I really like Ron. You could definitely tell Ron Altbach is on this one, especially with some of the production stuff. I think it's a very pretty song, and it kicks Lady Liberty's ass. And I love the breakdown too that they do at the end with the just vocals. I think whenever the Beach Boys incorporate that into a song, it's just like a small acapella part. Like with I Can Hear Music, it's just a really cool touch.
Mm-hmm.
That was what I was just thinking of. I Can Hear Music. That's like my favorite part of the song when they do that like little breakdown.
This is a really great production. Ron Altbach did a really great job with this. like in comparison to some of the stuff on MIU, which is more sparse. You can tell that they spent a lot of time on this song and they worked on it for many years. Um, it was actually Sterling Smith that came up with the idea of putting Jesus, Joy of Man's Desiring on the beginning. He was kind of a classically trained musician that joined the Beach Boys at this point. And he's the one playing the harpsichord on this specific song. And yeah, it's a really nice touch. And also you have that previous song that had the harpsichord, Good Timin, and then this one it's kind of really unique because this is kind of a texture we haven't heard for quite a while in a Beach Boys record. But it is very I think it's very of the times, this song as well too. It's something that you kind of hear on adult contemporary radio back in the late 70s. It's something that I think that they would have had a really big hit with if it was in the US, I mean, if it was marketed correctly.
Sorry, I'm working too, so I don't know if it's already been mentioned, but I have heard that Dennis contributed to the string arrangement on Lady Linda, which I think is a really cool aspect. One of the last times Dennis was acting as a collaborative member of the group and not just working on his own songs. And this is probably my favorite Al song of his contributions to the Beach Boys. I think it's so gorgeous. And like others have mentioned, the acapella breakdown is one of the highlights of the 70s for sure. I love at Nebworth when Mike wants to do it one more time and so they do it again. Beautiful. I love that song. And Al plays a nice 12-string guitar on that too.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite of Al's compositions. It's definitely my top 2 or 3. I just think it's beautiful, like you said. And I think it's one of the best sounding songs they did from this period for sure. You can tell they like Justin said, they spent a lot of time on this. It just sounds really well produced. So,
and it's not ripped off from the Kingston Trio.
That's true. It's true. He picked a different person to he went a little even older than that. So,
no, we love you, Al. I'm just kidding. I know in folk music too, it's very traditional to take from other artists.
All right, so we'll move on to the third track on side 1 of LA. And this is the first Carl co-write. It's Full Sail. So this song was written by Carl and Geoffrey Cushing-Murray, who collaborated on multiple songs on this album, as I mentioned earlier. For me personally, I think this is a really pretty song. It's kind of got that classic kind of yacht rock sound that you heard a lot in the late 70s from artists like Christopher Cross and people like that. But in the case of this song, I think Carl's vocal really lifts this song for me. He delivers such a really, really pretty vocal as always. I think the lyrics are really nice as well. I've always kind of interpreted them as being about like moving on after a rough period in your life, which I think Carl was kind of at that point in his life. At that point, he had just gone through a really rough period, like with his marriage falling apart and stuff. So I kind of interpret it that way. I love the lyric, does the silence of the sea sound warning of a storm ahead? Whispers of the breeze stir and disappear, too soft to hear what's in store for me. I've always really liked that line. And I also just love the strings on this. I love the string arrangement. I love the production and the really nice backing harmonies and vocals. I think it's mostly just Carl and Bruce on this, as a lot of these tracks are in terms of the backing vocals. But I do really like this song a lot, and I think it's one of the highlights for me. So, what do you guys think of Full Sail?
Yeah, I agree. It's a very pretty song, and a nice Carl co-write. And I think it's one of those, like, it's kind of one of those songs where like it's like life reflecting art, or art reflecting life at the time. Because I know like this was around the time that his marriage fell apart, and yeah, it's a really pretty song.
Yeah, this is a great one. As usual, Carl delivers a great vocal. I think the backing vocals are pretty underappreciated on this one, as well as that little like drum breakdown before the second verse. And I really love that bridge, "Adventure on the High Seas."
Yeah.
It's a really good song, some great lyrics. This one rocks. It was one of the slower growers for me of the 3 Carl tracks, or I guess 4 if you include Good Timin'. But I really like this one, and I feel like this is one of those songs that gives the album that yacht rock sound, and it kind of makes it a bit more cohesive than it would have been if it was just a couple of songs written by each member.
Yeah, this song, I really like this song as well too. It makes you feel like you're out on the water in the middle of nowhere, and it's a beautiful day, and you're sailing, and it's just a really great feeling that it brings. The atmosphere, it's a really great contemporary Beach Boys sound, especially with the first few tracks. Like I said at the beginning, when I first heard this album, I was expecting something really bad from what the critics had said, like that it was really poor and like really shitty. And this was anything but, like it was a great sound for 1979 for the Beach Boys. They could have easily had hits with these songs if they'd been marketed correctly, and they would have had a bigger selling album too if it was marketed correctly.
Full Sail, the lyric, of course, it has something to do with, like the Beach Boys over. I was trying, looking at what am I going to do? Well, I had the Full Sail part, and I said, well, this is kind of like, what's the famous, their big ocean going song. I feel so I want to go home.
Sloop John B.
Yeah, Sloop John B. I was like, okay, well,
they have a lot of songs about the ocean, so I don't blame you.
So Sail on Sailor, that stuff. So well, I think I can work with this, and it's got a lot of nice lyrics to it, and it's lush, and
yeah, it's a very pretty track.
Yeah, and Carl singing, it's.
Do you have and like you said, so you said kind of like you kind of took inspiration from a lot of like looking at the Beach Boys and.
Well, yeah, it's like, okay, what fits to our songs? There was nobody there but Carl and I in the room, so I produced Carl's vocals.
There you go.
I produced Carl's vocals, and actually, I learned an awful lot doing that, because came out and played one of the songs for James Guercio, who's a very famous producer, Chicago. Yeah. And Guercio said, Jeff, you should go back in there because it doesn't sound like Carl knows the song. And I said, okay. Went back in and, worked on it some more and, got a better vocal out of Carl than, because I was, yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. That's Carl Wilson.
Carl Wilson.
That's right. Yeah. What am I doing in here? Yeah. Why am I sitting behind the control booth, telling him, saying, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. You're working with Carl Wilson. You're going to be scared shitless telling him that's a bad vocal. You're not going to
tell him. Yeah. Try this.
All right. So now moving on to the fourth track on side one of LA, we have Angel Come Home. So this song is another Carl and Geoffrey Cushing-Murray composition, but this one is sung by Dennis. So this song, I'll admit, I'm not as crazy about this song as many fans seem to be, but it is growing on me. I do really like Dennis's vocal. It's very soulful. You can definitely has a lot of emotion in it, which I think is kind of the appeal of this song for a lot of people. I do also really like the kind of chorus, like the part where he's like, "It's been hell being here alone." It's like a very soulful vocal. I will say I've never been crazy about after the chorus, the backing vocals, like the "Angel Come Home." I've never been a huge fan of that. It sounds a bit jarring to me. But besides that, I would say the song is pretty strong. I do enjoy it. It's one that I've been coming back to more lately, but it's still not a highlight of the album for me personally. But I know you guys probably like it more than I do. So let's hear your thoughts.
I think it's the best thing on the album. It's really nice to hear a Carl Dennis collab. I think Dennis, the vocal is amazing. I think you really feel like the hurt and the pain in his voice. I think the grittiness helps. I don't really have a problem with the backing vocals. To me, they're not jarring, but different strokes. I think that this quote sums it up best from the critic Richard Williams: "The most beautifully textured and exquisitely pain-racked white soul music ever made." I think that's perfect. I love this song. I think it's so moving. It's always been a highlight for me, and I think it always will. And for me, by far the best thing on the album. I absolutely adore this song.
Yeah, when I was first getting into the Beach Boys, I guess not even when I was first getting into them, because it took me a while to kind of get into this one album. But when I first listened to this song, I think maybe last year or the year before, and I heard it, I fell in love with it instantly. I think it's one of those cases where every part of the song works great. Because sometimes with some of these highlights from the later 70s period, I'll think a verse is okay, and it's just the song is really elevated by the chorus. I think each part of the song is incredible. I love Dennis's vocal. I love the slow buildup where it's like, "I've been in and out of my head," and then it goes right into the chorus. It's "Angel Come Home," or sorry, "Angel Come Home." And then I really like and I do love the backing vocals, which is like, "Angel, Angel Come Home."
Yeah, there's a dichotomy between the two.
It's one of the greatest hooks of the Beach Boys' later career. And this one's just fucking rocks. And I love it when Dennis sings a Carl song, and I love it when Carl sings a Dennis song. And the lyrics on this one are pretty damn cool too.
Yeah, they are
There's
pretty.
a funny story about that in the interview about how they had to record this song because Dennis was the one singing it. So
This was a song that I wasn't expecting Dennis to sing. Like when I read the credits of the album, it said Carl, so I was expecting a Carl vocal. So it's kind of a pleasant surprise. And I kind of knew what to expect with Dennis's voice because I'd heard Pacific Ocean Blue before this, so I was used to that kind of gruff voice that he had at this point. I think that this song has really great production. There's some really great synthesizer work, especially in the second verse. There's like a little kind of counter melody that plays up high on the synthesizer. And this is also a song where we first hear kind of Carl playing the guitar in a similar way that he would throughout his solo career. Like he's playing through a boss chorus, and it's like he's just like the way that he's playing it. It's very reminiscent of some of the stuff on his first solo album. I think it's a very emotional vocal performance from Dennis. This track and the next track that we're going to talk about as well. It's incredible the vocal performance. And we've gotten into four songs already, and there's no sign of Mike at all, which I was very shocked when I first heard this album.
something's on its way. I will say, I think this one, I don't know if I would like it as much if it wasn't sung by Dennis.
Yeah,
this one
absolutely.
almost
I
knocked
agree.
down its lamp. I think that it's such a soulful, and I think the raspy vocal really works for this one. I think I would have liked it if Carl sang it, but if it was anybody else in the band, I don't think I really would have liked it.
I think I said this to one of you guys in the chat a while back, but I feel like if Carl had sung this, even though I'm sure it would have been a nice vocal from him as always, I kind of feel like it wouldn't be that distinguished from like a lot of the stuff on his solo albums, which I think is kind of, those songs I think are kind of bland for the most part. I think really Dennis's vocal is what elevates this for me personally. So
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I think Dennis's vocal had that like raw but earnestness that I think the song needed, that it elevates the tune.
yeah. And also it should be said too, I know like with Full Sail, I think you mentioned, Matt, how like it kind of reflected like what was going on with Carl's life. This is another one where Carl wrote it after like his first, marriage had fallen apart, and I think was written for his wife. So that makes it more moving as well. So
A lot of people like it. I mean,
I
I
love
can
this
remember, I can remember after after I, walked away because I pretty much walked away from the business. And I, working someplace else, and in a lunchroom somewhere, I said, I wrote some songs, like what, like Angel Come Home, and said, oh my God, that song was the song of the year for me. And I said,
That's awesome.
that really makes it, that makes it worthwhile. And there's a famous newsletter, right, that written by that circulates all over the music industry, called the Left Sets Letter. You could subscribe to it if you wanted to, but it goes into a lot of different stuff. And Left Sets wrote a whole long piece on Angel Come Home, that it was his absolute favorite breakup song. Every breakup he ever had, he played Angel Come Home. It was his all-time favorite breakup song. And that Dennis Wilson wrote it was just incredible. And my friends said, oh no. Oh no, that's Geoffrey Cushing-Murray. So when we were cutting Angel Come Home, Dennis didn't want anybody. He didn't want anybody in the studio but Carl, and the engineers and such. So I sat outside. I sat on the steps outside, and Angel Come Home has some strange little things in it. Again, Carl wasn't familiar exactly with how stuff was supposed to be phrased, how it was meant to be phrased, because some of it's a little tricky. So Carl would come out and say, how's that part go? And then he would go back in and tell Dennis, and then like a few minutes later, he'd come back out again, and that what were you going to do there? And he'd go back, in, and that's how it was done. And it came up, Carl was right that the Dennis version, the Angel Come Home, was like tortured, and that's how I felt about it myself, because it was like part of my own personal torture. There's the conception was that it was, a lot of people say that Angel Come Home was about Carl and his divorce.
Right.
And well, maybe, when we first talked about the song, he had this idea of, honey, bring the angels back home. And I didn't know exactly how that might work out as a lyric.
Right.
Honey, I had my own personal, my own personal thing going on where I'd been dumped by somebody, to whom I am currently married for over 30 years now. I mean, she dumped me for a soap opera actor in New York, and there was like a big separation for like years and years and years. And so that, now the puzzle laid on my table and the piece, because I couldn't, it was an emotional thing that I felt that she and I were meant, to be together. And, when it broke up, it personally destroyed me. I mean, how could I be so wrong about this? Right.
Yeah.
And so now the puzzle laid out on my table and the pieces don't fit. It's hard to talk about, like collaboration, because part of it is like being in the room with somebody. Right. And, just being in the room and the vibe and some kind of magic happens that it probably might not have happened at all if I'd just been sitting there by myself. And honestly, if I'd been in the room all by myself writing the song, it probably never would have got finished, because that's my problem. It's Christine McVie was asked about her desert island songs. She was like on a desert island, and Angel Come Home was her choice.
That's awesome.
Was a choice, yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to the next track on side one, which is Love Surrounds Me. So this is a Dennis and Geoffrey Cushing-Murray composition. And this was one of those songs that was originally intended for Dennis's second solo album, Bamboo, but the band decided to release it onto this album. So I really like this song a lot, actually. It has a kind of like a funky vibe to it, which I really dig. I think Dennis does that style very well. It's another really great soulful vocal from Dennis. I love the way that he sings this. It's very emotive. The lyrics are also very moving as well, very kind of heartbreaking lyrics. I love the lines, did I have love or did love have me? I think it's a really good line. Also, the love that I lost is more than I could hope to find. Really nice lyrics on this. I also find that falsetto part that kind of comes up throughout the song to be very haunting. I don't know who sings that. Maybe Justin knows who that is, but I always really find that very moving. I will say, if there's one little critique I have of this song, I do think the ending could be trimmed a little bit. I think the last minute or so, it's kind of just repeating this part and it's not really doing anything. Like, I think they could have put something else there, like a guitar solo or something. But otherwise, I think it's a really good song. And I think it's one of the more underrated songs, both by Dennis and on this album.
Yep. So this I know was original. This was one of the two that was originally intended for Bamboo, but Bamboo obviously was never finished. It's a very moving piece. I love the synthesizer work on it. I think that's Dennis. Like, I really like what he's doing on there. And this also has backing vocals from Christine McVie, who Dennis was dating at the time. So that's really cool. Very moving song, very heartfelt song. I really enjoy it. It's a definite highlight on the album. And I can definitely see why the Beach Boys plucked it to put on this, because they obviously knew that this was a real gem. So I really enjoy it.
Yeah, well, when the song was given to Cushing-Murray, it was just an instrumental, and he just added lyrics to it. And it's very, what he told me in the interview is like around this time in his life, his girlfriend left him for a soap opera actor, which I thought, I don't know why. But I feel like you kind of see a lot of that in this lyric, and not just these lyrics, but also in Angel Come Home, which he said he also wrote with similar stuff, similar theme. But I love this one. It's my second favorite on the album. I love how like almost funky it is with that breakdown after that. Because when I first listened to the song, I was like, oh, this one's kind of boring. But then like after like 20 seconds it goes to, And I just thought that was so fucking cool. And it makes that first part worth it because it's like a slow build up and then you just have that little funk breakdown. I love the lyrics on this one, but I have lover to love have me, but all of them are really great. And I like this one for different reasons, Angel Come Home. I just think it's a funky track, and it's not at all what I would expect to be on a Beach Boys album. I could totally see this being on Bamboo, but I'm really glad it's on this one because I don't think I would have found it as soon as I did. I love this one. Great track.
Yeah, I think Dennis did funk the best out of anybody in the group because you can hear a
It
lot
reminds
of
me of Dreamer from Pacific
yeah,
Ocean.
yeah. You can hear
Yeah.
a lot of the funky stuff on. I mean, not only like Got to Know the Woman, but also like a lot of the stuff on Pacific Ocean Blue is very bluesy and funky, which is probably why I love it so much because I'm a
Yeah.
sucker for that funky
And
blues.
Jake, I'm gonna disagree with you on this. I love those last 2 minutes where it's just that repeated. It's so
I'm not
cool.
surprised that you guys disagree on that because I think Riley, that's more your style than it is Jake's style, from what I can tell.
I agree though. If there was something else there, I might like it a bit more. It just depends what it was. I don't know if a guitar solo would have been right. Maybe just like a funk breakdown.
Yeah.
Like Pink Floyd's Echoes, but
Or like something you'd hear on David Bowie's Young Americans, right? Like
yeah, like it's like a 2 minute funk breakdown would be really cool. Like a
Yeah.
thumping, but that would not fit really on a Beach Boys album.
It would fit on like Pacific Ocean Blue though, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Love this one.
Yeah, this track, it's very on Beach Boys like. It's more like something you'd hear in 1979 on the radio or something, but it is a little bit more nuanced than like something you'd hear on the radio. There's a lot of different moods that happen in this song. Uh I love the synthesizer work that Matt mentioned with, I think that was the Oberheim 8 voice, kind of bounces in between the stereo spectrum back and forth. Phil Chanel does some great kind of synth strings on there as well too. Um, yeah, and then the drums, the way they were recorded, they sound like super super wide when you listen to it on headphones. It's just a really great recording. And that high voice at the end, I believe that was Bruce that sang that.
That was my guess. That's what I was
Yeah.
assuming. But I was like, I can't tell if that sounds like his voice or not. But that would be my guess. Yeah.
I
Nate,
believe it
Nate
was
wants
Bruce.
to add that. Yep, definitely Bruce, and he gave me 2 thumbs up. Nate likes
Yeah,
Bruce.
what can I say that you guys haven't said already? This is again another great track from the album list. We're 5 tracks in, and all the tracks have been great thus far.
No Mike Love yet.
No Mike Love yet.
Yeah, this is a very front-loaded album because then you flip it over and goes downhill fast.
We're talking about Love Surrounds Me,
Yeah,
which was originally meant to be on Bamboo.
right.
And they were they were looking for stuff to fill out the album, the LA Light album. And James William Guercio, the very famous producer, he said, here's the track. It was an empty track, right? It's just a basic instrumental track.
Right.
And didn't have any words, just had a title. And said, here, you do it. You finish it.
New guy.
And I did. And Dennis was well, I'm sure you've heard, and it's no surprise. Dennis was a real character.
Yeah.
I don't think he was enthusiastic about somebody else finishing a song for him. And if you look at the structure of it, it's kind of it's it's the kind of crap that would come out of me. Like not a typical kind of structure. Over. It didn't look like, oh, here's the chorus, and here, it got all kind of like wiggled around somehow or other, and Dennis wasn't so sure about it. And then he and I, it was just he and I in the studio when he cut the vocal, and I carried him through it, and it came out, and a lot of people really liked that song a lot.
I love it. That's one of my favorites from the album.
I also wanted to mention Full Sail. I mean, I'm a bit behind on this. Cushing-Murray was also on the backing vocals on that one.
Oh, really? Interesting.
He's on the backing vocals on a couple of these, actually.
Actually, according to Wikipedia, it only has him on Full Sail, but Wikipedia could very much be wrong.
He's on
Nate
Angel
wants
Come
to-
Home too, right?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
said that he wasn't credited for a lot of them, but
Yeah.
I believe him.
I
He
can
said you
see
can hear him in
that.
the stack.
I could see that. It's like the whole "Did Dennis write You Are My You Are So Beautiful." My opinion, yes, it sounds like it. It sounds like a Dennis song.
Yeah, but Nate also wanted to add that Mike is on every backing vocals on this one except for the Dennis tracks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think
At
like
the time, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, because by this point in time they were like this.
Yeah.
No 10 years of harmony for those guys.
Imagine if Mike had sung this since it's "Love Surrounds Me." Did I have love or did love have me?
Nate said he's gonna re-record it, and I think it's gonna be for Last Love.
Last Love. There you
You have to add it to the list. All you need is love.
All right. So speaking of Mike Love, we now move on to the final track on side one of LA. And this is Sumahama. So this song was written and sung by Mike. I think as one of us mentioned, this was originally intended for one of his unreleased solo albums, which was First Love. So in my opinion on this song, I really enjoy it melodically. I think it's a great melody. I think production, it also sounds really good as well. I assume Bruce played a big role in that. I think he did a great job with it. I also love that little part at the end of the chorus, like the somewhere between the earth, the sky, and water, there at Sumahama. I always really like that part. What I don't like is when Mike starts singing in Japanese. It feels a bit forced and a little weird. Like it just kind of comes out of nowhere. It's like, why is he singing in Japanese? Also, not the first song where Mike attempts to speak in another language, because he does this on Bells of Paris as well, where he's speaking in French for some reason. Also, it should be pointed out, one of us mentioned this before we started recording, that the song was supposedly inspired by Mike's fiance at the time, but she was actually Korean and not Japanese, so not really sure what that's about. But anyway, also, I recently learned that this song was released as a single in the UK, and it actually didn't do too bad. It charted around, I think it was like number 40 or number 45, which honestly isn't that bad at all. So I think the song's solid. It's not a skip for me by any means, but it's also not one that I come back to too often. Just because I think that Japanese part's a little too much. But
Yeah, I do think the production is nice. It does have that kind of like Asian-y kind of vibe with some of the instrumentation and stuff. It is a little syrupy with some of the strings and stuff, but it's not too bad. I think Mike does a pretty good vocal on it, and I do like the English lyrics. Once the Japanese comes in, it becomes a little cringy, and it is a little long. I don't think the song need to be like 4 minutes long. So I like the song, but I do think a little fine tuning was needed. And once again, singing a song in Japanese about a Korean subject. There's a lot of centuries old beef with those two countries. That's all I'm going to say. But so I like it, but I think it needed a little fine tuning just to make it a bit stronger.
Not to beat a dead horse, but yeah, I think the first 2.5 minutes are really great. And then he starts speaking in Japanese. And I can almost appreciate the approach, but yeah, she was Korean. And I feel like you would know that about your fiance, that she's Korean and not Japanese, but it's 70s were a wild time. Still, I think it's a very pretty song. And I feel like a lot of the English lyrics are very heartfelt, and I don't speak a word of Japanese, so maybe the Japanese lyrics are also heartfelt. They're just not in English. But yeah, it's a pretty solid song, and at least it ends the side. So if I don't want to hear the Japanese part, I could just. So yeah, if it was like 2.5 minutes, I would actually maybe say this is one of the better songs on the album. But
I agree. It's too long.
4 minutes and about a minute and a half is in Japanese.
Justin?
Yeah, for me, it's a pretty good Mike song. Like you guys mentioned, it should have been shortened a little bit. Take out the Japanese lyrics. We didn't really need them, and end off the side that way, like maybe a 2 or 3 minute song. And then I think the production's really great. Bruce did a really great job with that. It is a little bit syrupy, but it does work with the song, the chords and stuff, and the way the mood that they're trying to create. Yeah, it's a pretty decent song other than the Japanese. That's all I have to really say about that.
All right, so I guess we will move on now to the first track on the second side of LA. This is the one. Oh no, but there's one other one we have to talk about, and it's called Here Comes the Night. So I'm just going to get my thoughts on this song out of the way real quick. So this is obviously a disco remake of the Wild Honey song from 1967, which I do actually really like the original. This disco version was produced by Bruce and Kurt Betcher. And in my opinion, this is just really boring and unmemorable disco. I don't think there's that much that's really appealing about it at all. I think it's just kind of boring. They kind of threw the kitchen sink at it in terms of production. Like they got all these sound effects and noises, strings. I think Justin, you mentioned before, there's like monkey sound effects at one point. Like, what the hell is that about? It's just, it doesn't work. I read that Dennis hated this song. I think Al hated it as well. And the fans hated it too, because I think when they first performed this song, I think in New York, they first like debuted it live. And a lot of the fans were like booing and like kind of like, criticizing it. So they dropped it from the set list pretty quick after that. This single, as a single, it did chart at number 44. So it wasn't a horrible showing, but obviously not what they were going for. With the amount of time that they had put into this, they obviously intended it for it to be a huge hit. My biggest problem with this song, though, is the fact that the album version is 10 freaking minutes long. There is no reason this needs to be 10 minutes long. I mean, even 5 or 6 minutes would feel long for this, just because I feel like there's not much going on. But like the fact that it's that long and literally takes up like a fourth of this album's runtime, it's inexcusable. So I don't care for any version of this song, whether it's the album version, the single version. I just think it's really boring disco. And I guess Carl's vocal is solid, but besides that, there's just not much to take away here. I just think it's really lame.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everything you said. Like, I can like some disco. I do. I don't think it's like a horrible genre that is like terrible, like some people think. But this is just not even interesting. It's too long. I can see why it was hated by the fans. This was like, I think shortly before that whole like disco demolition night, which was a problem for like, that was problematic for other reasons. But, like people just get tired of all this stuff. And this is an example of just tired, played out disco. And it's too long and it's not that interesting. And I can see why Dennis left the stage when they played it. It's not great. It's not great.
I'm gonna kind of play devil's advocate here. I don't think it should have been on the album. I think that was a big mistake. I think if they wanted to do a disco song, just make it a single. If they wanted to do a 10-minute disco song, just make it a damn single. Don't put it on an album that is otherwise very cohesive. However, I think that if this was like 3.5 minutes, and it was released as a single, and I personally had no recollection of this being a 10-minute song on the LA album, I think I would actually kind of like it. But because of how I was introduced to it, because of how history did turn out, I think it fucking sucks. But I think that it was a waste of space on the album. And it's kind of weird because they put in a lot of work to it. When I did the interview, he told me that they had like 50 session musicians in the freaking studio. With strings and shit, and I guess monkey sounds too, apparently.
That was probably stock effects, I imagine.
But still, like, I would have appreciated it if it was like a 3.5 minute non-album single.
What is a 3.5 minute?
But just a 3.5 minute non-album single.
Yeah, not taking up a quarter of the runtime of this.
Because there was so many outtakes from not just this era, but from every era of the Beach Boys that they could have used. I would have taken I Do or Pamela Jean on this album.
I mean, that wouldn't have fit, but honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
Honest.
But it should have just been released as a 3.5 minute non-album single instead of the
I think Jack Riley said it best, where they blew it and they continue to blow it. And this is an example of continuing to blow it.
This was also, like Cushing-Murray said, couple of years too late.
Yeah, I think like if this had come out like 77, 78, like the peak of like Saturday Night Fever, it would have done better.
And if it wasn't 10 minutes.
Yeah, and it wasn't. Well, 10 minutes and doesn't do anything. I'm fine with 10 minutes if it's like interesting, like the MacArthur Park suite that Donna Summer did, 17 minutes, but it's interesting. So I can listen to it for 17 minutes. This is just not even interesting.
I listen to a lot of funk and soul and I guess disco music, and I do enjoy it. Bruce really was obsessed with disco at this point. He did those 2 disco tracks for the Going Public album in 1977.
Oh, God.
And I think he had a little bit of success with Pipeline. And I think that he was trying to repeat that and thought maybe he could do it a little bit better with the Beach Boys. The problem is that bands, even at that time, they didn't put 12-minute, 12-inch single remixes on an entire album. I understand what he was trying to do. They didn't have a lot of material. He was trying to waste up as much time as possible.
Waste.
Yeah. And he thought this would be kind of like the big showpiece of the album, to make everybody kind of stop and go like, wow, it is a great vocal arrangement. Like, it's pretty technically great that they were able to do that, but it doesn't really emotionally move you. And I have to say, like looking at this list of musicians that play on this song, it's actually quite shocking that this came off so soulless because you have Bob Esty. He played synth on this song. He was Donna Summer's arranger and producer at the time. You have Wawa Watson and Richie Zito playing guitar. They played with Michael Jackson and a few other people as well too around that time. A lot
Damn.
of other people.
Yeah, they got some on this.
Yeah,
You're
Mike
telling me
Baird.
people that played on like Off the Wall, right?
Yeah.
That's a great record.
Mike Baird played drums. He was a session musician in LA, and he later played with Journey in the mid '80s. Victor Feldman, he played percussion. He was a great jazz musician for many, many years, for like since the '50s. And he also played piano as well too, but he didn't play piano on this track. You have Joe Chimay, who played bass. He played with Michael Nesmith around this time as well too. And then you have the first appearance of Mike Maros playing the clavinet and Wurlitzer on this song. He was in the Beach Boys touring band for many, many years after that. So you have quite a lineup, but it's not a moving track. And I think that Bruce was trying to make this like the perfect disco track. Like it's like everything's perfectly mathematically in time, and it failed because it does not move emotionally. And there's just some of these disco records are better than others. I know a lot of the techniques and stuff that they used to use at the time because there wasn't computers and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty pretty crazy because some of these would be like drum loops. They would because there's no display on like the computer to look at like what the tempo is and stuff. They'd actually use like the SMPTE code on the tape to figure out exactly where each bass drum needs to be put and like do it that way and like splice it and like put the kick drum on every single hit. It's like pretty crazy. So it's easy to see why they'd use that many sessions, but it just was not a memorable song.
Yeah. It's interesting too. I almost feel like you could view it like it's almost like what you said about like it's got the elements, like the elements are there, like in terms of the production and stuff, but it's almost like you had like an AI generate a disco song, what it would come up with. Because it's like everything sounds like perfect, like you said, with the production, but it's just like it just doesn't come off as anything that's like gonna stick in your mind or be memorable or have any sort of connection with. It's just there. And it just kind of chugs along and you're kind of just, I feel like after the first few minutes, I'm already waiting for it to end. I'm kind of like, all right, like let's wrap it up. And it's like, it just keeps fucking going. And a lot of it is just sound effects. For quite a bit of it, it's just, there's not even much going on. It's really the interesting part for me, I guess, is just when Carl's singing. But besides that, it's really, really boring for most of the track.
Well,
it's because it's something that would have gone on a 12-inch mix. It's like they do those extended breakdowns and stuff because it was for DJs to play when people are dancing. It's not really something that you listen to.
This doesn't make me want to dance. This makes me want to fucking break something.
Well, I guess I'm here to do my job because I love it. I think it's a little long, and I agree that it's a little out of place, but I think it's like a masterpiece of production for the era, especially like what Justin was describing about doing tape loops with drums back then, pre-computers. I think Bruce's vocal arrangement and the way it's executed is like top tier. Like it's insane how tight it is. And personally, I consider like the single version, which is a couple minutes, like fabulous. And for what it's worth, it's like one of my fiance's favorite Beach Boys songs because she loves ABBA and disco and stuff. So I think if you approach it with fresh ears and take aside like some of the politics, the single version is really, really something to marvel at. And the album version, while I do agree it's out of place, and usually I skip it after a few minutes and go to the next song, I guess I'll say I'm glad it's there just because it's something so different. And the Beach Boys, with 2020, they had a hard rock and a country song and a waltz. So I think I think one of the cool things about the Beach Boys is that you can have so many genres on one album. It just is a bummer that it's in place of some other good tunes, but great production work. And as a producer, I like study that. So it's a cool thing. And Bruce did a really good job. And as did Kurt and all the boys.
Well, all I'm gonna say is "Off the Wall" is one of my favorite albums, and it's my favorite Michael Jackson album, and this is nowhere close to that. So that's all I'm gonna say.
Well, and I love ABBA too. I'm probably the biggest ABBA fan here. Like I freaking love them. I listen to like even their deep cuts and stuff. I think they're great. And like I kind of like can compare like their music because they have a lot of disco like music and compare it to this. And it's just like this just feels so soulless and just bland compared to like that music. But I think for sure, like if I had like obviously Nate, you do a lot of production and stuff. If I had like that kind of knowledge, so I could see how you could appreciate this more for sure.
Well, I just want to say one thing before we move on, Justin, just because you said something about this song was very methodical. I think that's kind of the problem. Is like I feel like because disco is kind of an offspring of funk and R&B,
Right.
and a lot of that stuff is about the feeling. It's not about being methodical. It's about just grooving with the music. You put the instrument in your hand, you just kind of you rip. Same with like the blues too. It's about like the freestyle and like and the vibes. And when you're just like making it methodical, it loses the soul. It loses what gives it the edge. So I think you kind of said it best. This is not the kind of music that should be methodical. I don't think any music should be methodical, but especially not
That's
like disco or funk or soul or anything like that.
that's part of the reason why disco died.
Because it got methodical. Exactly. No,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
right. You're right.
Revolution 9, Revolution 9, or Here Comes the Night Disco mix 10 minutes.
Well, Revolution 9, at least I don't like that one either, but at least that one is a little bit more avant-garde. This is just disco cliches. Blender. So yeah, I'm going with Revolution 9.
Yeah. Can I just say I don't like the backing vocals on this here, like the here come the I hate that shit. It drives me nuts. See that gives it like when it starts with that, I'm like, okay, this is promising, and then it just from that point just nothing happens. So all right, so we'll move on to the next track. And this is the second Dennis composition on this album, and it was also another track that was intended for Bamboo originally. It's Baby Blue. So this song, I think this is a really pretty piano ballad by Dennis. It was also co-written with Greg Jacobson and I believe Karen Lamb as well.
Mm-hmm.
The verse melody is sung by Carl really beautifully. I think as you mentioned, Riley, like when Carl sings Dennis's songs, it really works. It's a really great pairing. And I also really love Dennis's bridge section on this, where Dennis sings the lead, like the late at night when the whole world's sleeping. It's a really soulful vocal, and I really enjoy it a lot. I this is for me probably a top 10 Dennis song for me. I wouldn't put it up there with like his all-time best, but I do think it's a really strong track, and I think it was smart to include it on this album. Although again, it is a shame that Bamboo was never actually like officially released back then.
But yeah, I agree with everything you said. It's a very heartfelt song. It's a very heartfelt vocal, some great lyrics. I wonder if this song, and I know Carl does a good vocal on it too. I wonder if this song, since he wrote this with Karen Lamb, I wonder if this was like kind of reflective of like their relationship at the time, because I know they had a very up and down relationship, like pretty much everything. But yeah, I really, really like this song. It's definitely a highlight of the album. It's very moving. I really think, honestly, the Dennis and Carl songs kind of make this record for me. I think they really are what kind of sets it apart. So this is definitely a contributor to that.
I really like this one. I think it's a very beautiful song, but I will say I kind of agree with Jake. It's super beautiful, but it's kind of the most Dennis Wilson that Dennis got. It's I guess it's kind of Dennis sticking to his formula, which obviously works out. I think it's a very pretty song. I like the melody. I like the vocals from Carl. Like I said, when Carl takes a Dennis song, it's really good, and when Dennis takes a Carl song, it's really good. But at the same time, like, would I say it's one of his best? No. And that's kind of why I think that Love Surrounds Me is the better Dennis cut from this album, because it's Dennis kind of going in a new direction for himself rather than sticking to his heartfelt ballads. That being said, though, I know I feel bad for saying what I said about it, but I think it's a lovely song. It's one of the best on the album. Like we've been saying, Carl and Dennis make this album, and this is kind of like, for me, proves to me why it's kind of a spiritual successor to Holland.
Well, I think I get what you're saying, though. You're saying it's a pretty song, but it's not really new. It's kind of Dennis treading old territory, whereas like Love Surrounds You was at least going in a new direction. So I totally get it. I get exactly what you're
And honestly, most of Pacific Ocean Blue was him treading new directions. And
yeah, it was.
I don't think I would have wanted an album with 10, 12 baby blues. I want an album with.
That's why I love Pacific Ocean Blue, because I love it has the great soulful stuff, but also I love the funky stuff. I know a lot of people hate like What's Wrong, and I love that song. It's so bluesy. I love it. I just want to put on and dance.
Jake, what were you trying to say?
I feel like this song kind of falls more into like the cuddle up realm of like Dennis's songwriting. And again, I do like that song. I just think it's overproduced to hell. But like again, like you said, it's kind of like he's going back to his usual style of like these very moving piano ballads, but it's like we've heard that, so I get that perspective, and I agree with you. Also, I think Love Surrounds Me is the better track, even though I used to prefer Baby Blue.
Well,
Yeah, same here.
this at least does not have Daryl Dragon on it, because that's what caused the overproduction on Cut a Lot.
Look.
Oh God, Justin.
I can't do that voice. It ruins my throat.
I really like this song. I think it gets lost as well with the other song after this. Kind of gets lost after that. Here Comes the Night, Disco Fest, and it. I think that they should have put a faster track here at this point before going into the ballads and have it close out with the ballads. The sequencing is a little bit off here because we have two really beautiful ballads after that dance track. It doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, Carl does a great job on the vocals, and I like Riley said, like Carl singing Dennis songs, Dennis singing Carl songs. It works. It really does work. And I can't really say much else other than what you guys said. You covered it really well. Like this is just a really great song.
Does Nate have anything to add?
He's gonna add.
Not for all my comments to be Bruce related, but that's just what's coming to my mind. But I think one thing you can take away from this album is that Bruce like really, really helped those Bamboo tracks get to the finish line. And I do like the version of Bamboo that was released, but it still sounds like unfinished to some degree, obviously. And I just imagine a hypothetical world where even where Dennis was still alive or even afterwards, if Bruce was the one to bring Bamboo to the finish line, I think he would have been the man for the job.
Yeah,
I love the way it came out, but the Bruce produced Bamboo tracks that show up on LA are like the perfect balance between Dennis's soulfulness, and he keeps all that intact, but it definitely gives it that commercial sheen where the songs could have been hits too.
I actually would agree with that, because I think Dennis by this point in time had I think Greg Jacobson hypothesized that Dennis might have had ADD or ADHD. And I think that was the thing. I think Dennis would like work on something and then get distracted and go off in another direction. Whereas like I think Bruce kind of brought that like hyper focus. Okay, let's just try to get this done. And
because Bruce had history before the Beach Boys as a staff producer for Columbia, where there were constantly deadlines that he had to get productions done by. So he'd been doing that since he was a teenager practically. And yeah, that was just a great skill of his. And sometimes for better or worse, not all of his productions are flawless, but he was really good at the sticking to a date and being efficient side of production.
Yeah, I guess you can also get like as a film perspective. You look at like some directors are more workman directors that can kind of just slot in and get something done, and some are more like auteurs who have to have control of everything, but sometimes that causes production to run over long, or like the movie can kind of get a little messy and stuff. I'm kind of looking at it from that perspective too. And also I know Bruce and Dennis had a really good friendship and camaraderie, so I think they kind of understood each other in a way to get things done. So I actually agree. I think that's a very insightful comment you added.
Another Bamboo track that would have ended up on this album that I read about was that they were considering was Constant Companion. That the funky, yeah. That would have been interesting if that was on this album.
Hey, fucking Here Comes the Night though.
Can't that happen?
That's perfectly timed.
Disco vibes.
I mean, I'll give the Beach Boys credit though. They definitely are one of those artists that I would put on the list of like they did a bazillion different genres like the Beatles and David Bowie, and it's nice that there's variety. It's not like every song sounds the same.
Yeah.
Hey man, they write the songs.
They make the whole world sing. All right, so we'll move on to the second to last track on LA. And this is another Carl and Geoffrey Cushing-Murray co-write. This is Going South. So this song is kind of similar to Full Sail. It's kind of got like the yacht rock sound going. I'll admit that this song, I used to not care for it at all. I think on one of our earliest episodes, I kind of ragged on it. I said I thought it was really boring. But over time, listening to this album more, re-listening to this track, it has grown on me quite a bit. I do think it starts out a little slow, kind of sleepy, because the instrumentation is so like stripped back. Like it's literally just Carl's voice. Sometimes I think that works okay, but on this one, it does feel a little slow to me. But what I like about this song is that it gets better as it goes. I think after the saxophone solo comes in, then you get that beautiful bridge section, like the snowdrifts blowing up against my door, going clear up to the roof. I really love that. Really pretty section. And then the instrumentation at the end, it's a really pretty arrangement. So this is one of those songs that it kind of grows on me as it goes. And I think it's a well-produced song, just maybe a little too stripped back at the start for my liking. But I think it's a solid Carl and Geoffrey Cushing-Murray effort.
Yep, I agree. Very solid effort. And it's a nice palate cleanser after disco mess that came before.
I can't believe we talked about Here Comes the Night disco mix for like 50 minutes.
Well, we had to get the rage out.
Then Nate had to get the love in. All right, yeah, I'm kind of with Jake on this one, except you got to shift the timeline a bit more. Where I didn't really care for this one on the first listen, but on a couple more listens later, I really liked it. I think it's just a really sweet song that does get better as it goes on. I know Cushing-Murray said he didn't want the sax in it, but I love the saxophone in it. I think it just kind of adds to the complete vibe to the song. It reminds me a lot of lounge music, or like in like a jazz lounge or something, which I feel like with the direction Carl was kind of going towards with his first album.
Like kind of Bacharach-y, like you like lounging.
Yeah, but this compared to his first album, I feel like it's just I'm not sure where the step down was. Because I feel like this is a lot more memorable than a lot of his first effort. But I think the lyrics on this one are absolutely incredible. And hearing the like how Cushing-Murray came up with a lot of these lyrics is awesome. Like somewhere where everything is green or where the swallows go, I think is like really cool. It's a song about going south for the winter, quite literally, is what he said. But I mean, they take it in a really cool direction rather than just being cliche with it. But the keys on this really make it pop, and I do really like that stripped back sense in the beginning, and I like how it kind of grows compared to a song like "Cuddle Up" or "Make It Good," where it's just it's like gradual progression. It's great. I love this one. And I think I could see this one growing on me even more, knowing the backstory behind it.
Yeah,
that was a really good interview you did. I really enjoyed watching that.
I had a good time in interviewing him.
I could tell. I said you had this like giddy like
Right on your face, yeah.
Right on your face.
I was geeking out the entire time because I love this album.
Yeah, this song is a very sensitive track. I like Jake mentioned that snowdrifts blowing up against my door, that section. I think that section lifts the song. And then I also think that this would have been a good ending track instead of the next track. To end on this specific track, like it just makes sense to me. But unfortunately, that's not what happened.
Well, it's the one. Going south is the one. Yeah. We did it at Caribou. We were sitting there. Carl started playing some chords. It hadn't been a really productive day, and it was snowing a little bit, and I'm looking at the snow, like out the window. He's playing some stuff, and he said, "I think I'm going south for the winter." And it came out like in 15, 20 minutes. It was like, and then we spent the rest, we stayed up practically to dawn just going, that's really cool. That one should stand, should pretty much stand up for, I wish somebody else would fucking cover it. That's not just to make some money, but I think the production could have been a little bit better on it. Like I don't care for so much for even though it was a really good saxophone player at the end, and there was a full like in the bridge, they had a full string section. I mean, the room was full of string players, awesome. And which cost a lot of money and stuff like that.
Yeah, especially with analog tape, and it's not like you could just do it on the computer.
And we talked about it, and I said, I don't like the strings, and there aren't any. It's just, the Beach Boys singing, oohs and ahs in the bridge. Yeah. Snowdrifts blowing up against my door, going clear up to the roof. I could be in some west shore. I don't know what I'm waiting for.
I really like the lyrics on this one too. I think these are some sets.
You know who else likes them? I like them a lot.
Yeah, I could tell.
Oh yeah, I mean, to me is like, well, I have other songs that nobody ever heard that but I think the lyrics in that are just pretty nifty. Where the swallows, if you don't know there's the reference to the song when the swallows come back to Capistrano. You don't know that song probably, right?
No.
But that's where the swallows go when they leave when the swallows come back to Capistrano. That was the song, right? Da, 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 da. Well, I want to go wherever it is that they go when they leave Capistrano going south for the winter. So like if you were hip on your your 40s, early 50s songs,
Yeah.
You'd catch that reference, but it
Such a pretty one.
yeah. And okay, here's the thing. Carl didn't think he could sing it as well as I did. I'm telling you, God's honest truth. He said those words to me, and yeah. So that's it for me. My part of my whole thing. Why was I going to try to write songs? I said, I'm going to try to, if I could just write, one song that would, like stand up and that people would look at it and say, that's pretty nice song. That's really good. Then it would have made the whole, 20 years of my musical endeavors worthwhile. And yeah, so that it's going south for me.
So it's a good one. I'm going to listen to it a little bit closer now.
Yeah. And it comes, the snowdrift blowing up, that comes from when I was in college in West Virginia. I flew into Syracuse, New York, and there was a snowstorm in Syracuse. You're in the East Coast, right? You probably heard about Syracuse.
Of course, Syracuse, New York.
Yeah. So when I flew into Syracuse, there had been 80 inches of snow in Syracuse.
Holy crap!
I got in one of those old airport limousines, drove us all over town, and got me home. And we lived up on a hill, and the snowdrift was up against the roof. And my brother Bentley had dug a tunnel to get into the front door. So it's like, yeah.
That's that Northeast United States weather.
Yeah. So yeah, going south is the one that Carl and I, of those, that was our favorite.
Does Nate have anything to add, Riley?
Nate's downstairs.
Nate is going south.
He's going south. Get the fuck up.
That was good. Give me credit for that.
That was really good.
My house is one story.
Shut the fuck up.
I can't relate to going downstairs. So.
Nate's going south for the winter.
Matt really can't go that far south.
I'm already south. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. If Matt goes too far south, he's going to be in the fucking ocean. So
the ocean or the Amazon rainforest. Yeah.
He'll be an ocean.
We like to harmonize.
All right, so we'll move on to the final track on LA. And this is a song that we know Brian has always loved for many years. It's Shorten and Bread. So I don't have too many thoughts on this one, to be honest with you, because I'm just not really a big fan of this version of it. I've decided, I've kind of come to the conclusion that my biggest issue with it is I'm not a huge fan of Dennis's vocal on it. It kind of bothers me. I don't know. I don't think it works as well as when Brian just does the chorus on the Adult Child version. I do like Carl's lead on the verse, as I do on the Adult Child version. But I do definitely prefer that version over this one. I also think the guitar, I think maybe one of you guys mentioned this before, but I do think the guitar kind of overpowers it a little bit for me. And there's parts of it I do like, but there's parts of it I don't, where I'm like, this feels like too much to me. So not crazy about this version. It's one of the only tracks on this album I don't really listen to. I don't really come back to. And I'm glad that it's at the end of side 2, so you can just lift the needle and don't have to listen to it. So what do you guys think of this version of Shorten and Bread?
I just feel like Shortening Bread in general, like it doesn't matter what version. I feel like it's one of the songs that like the legend behind it is more interesting than the song itself. Like it's just like a very like old timey, like folk song that Brian was just really obsessed with. But like, it's just a whatever song to me. I don't care what rendition is. It's whatever to me. Like it doesn't. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's just there. I agree with what Justin said. I think Going South thematically would have made better sense as a closer. Yeah, like I said, I just think this is, like I said, this is a song that I feel like just the legend behind it and like scaring out Alice Cooper and stuff is just more interesting than the song itself. That's all I have to say about it.
I think it's very clear that they added this at the end to make up for space.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would have been 3 tracks to end side B, which is very non-Beach Boys thing to do, is to have 3 tracks to a side.
Yeah, it's not Pink Floyd or like Bowie Station to Station where it's like 3
Right.
songs, but they're long, so it makes sense.
Well, you do have that long one, but
But I'm just saying, like, not all 3 of them are long.
yeah, and they very clearly needed space. Not sure why they added on to it, but I like this one better than the Adult Child one. I think this is knowing the roots of this song of just being like a folksy, bluesy kind of thing, where his mom was in the kitchen, love short and short. If you've ever heard the original version, I feel like it makes more sense than going dirt, dirt, dirt. I like the guitar on it. I like Dennis and Carl's vocals. Do I think that is a great album track though? No. I think that they were just really making up for space, and there's a bunch of other songs they could have used, but they didn't. Still, I enjoy it for what it is. But I think if this was going to be on the album, it probably needs to open side B. That's the only real spot I could really find putting this. But I don't think this and Here Comes the Night don't need to be on the album. And there's a lot of other tracks they could have used, but they didn't. Because the Beach Boys are fucking dumbasses when it comes to
Track selection.
picking tracks. Put on San Miguel. That would have fit, I feel like, a hell of a lot better. Because you got Going South and you got San Miguel.
They should have just made this like the 2020 part 2 where we just take a bunch of shit. Like that was
40-40.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like at the end of the decade, like 2020, and we just take a bunch of stuff that had been recorded over time, we just throw it on an album.
Yeah, so this was a way to get Brian on the album, basically. So like you guys mentioned, that this was an album where they kind of cobbled like whatever they could out of the archives, and there was some other tracks that were mentioned around the time. Like I mentioned, Constant Companion was possibly going to be put on this album. Bruce mentioned putting Smile stuff on this album as well too, which was kind of interesting. So they were thinking about different things, but in the end, someone in the camp kiboshed that idea, and we end up with Shortening Bread. So this song, the first time you hear this album and you hear Going South and it's like quiet, and then all of a sudden, boom, this song just like scares you, basically. So it's a decent rendition of the song. It's kind of a unique, the way that Riley was describing like the piano pattern and stuff. It is kind of a unique pattern for this song, and it does make it somewhat interesting. But it's something that didn't really need to be put on the album. Like this, it would have been a fun like curiosity, like of an outtake or something like that. Like if it existed as that. But they just had other better songs that they could have used in this specific part. But for some reason they didn't, because either someone in the band didn't want that song on there, or just like arguments between different people.
Put on a new Bull Sessions. We want a new Bull Sessions.
Yeah,
I've done that in years.
I doubt that the guys were all in the same room at the same time for any of these tracks.
Okay.
All 5 of them wouldn't have been in the same room at the same time.
Put on a recorded argument between Dennis and Mike.
Honestly,
Give me the tarmac incident.
That would get ugly as fuck.
That would honestly
Well,
be. That
yeah.
would be like, what is that Wibbling rivalry? You know that thing where it's like Liam and Noel Gallagher were like fighting each other in the middle of the interview, like the fucking fairies. Like it'd be something like that, right? You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Except they're cousins who make their mamas
Get thrown off ferries going to the Netherlands. That's the funniest shit.
Dick
I
Rice.
will say, Matt,
Surprisingly.
like you're not that like crazy about the song itself, which I do get, but I will say if you haven't heard it already, check out that live version from like 79 of them doing it, because it like freaking rips. Like Carl's like, put on the skin.
I don't like I said, I don't hate the song. It's just kind of like I just feel like the legend of it and all these stories of Iggy Pop and Alice Cooper and stuff, like it just kind of overshadows the song. The song itself,
Roger McGuinn.
it's just like Roger McGuinn. That's Ding Dang, right? That's not this.
Yeah.
It's the same riff.
Yeah, but the riff is similar, right? The
Yeah,
riff
I
is
know.
like,
It's just
Well,
like I don't know. It's almost just feels like this to me. It's just like I think it's just like it's I think Brian is on the spectrum, and his obsession with the song shows.
To play devil's advocate, it's the end of the decade, and pretty much since the beginning of the 70s to the end, Brian was obsessed with this song.
I guess it's fitting, yeah.
It's a good way to close out those 10 years of harmony.
Stop. Dude, your Bruce impression, holy crap.
Wait till you come up to Milwaukee.
I can't wait.
I can speak to you all day. And what's up, Jake? Hey.
Won't be long. Okay.
Won't be long.
And I was thinking, like, it won't be long. I've listened to that album a lot with the Beatles.
All right, so that's the full LA track list. But to go into some of the outtakes from around this time, so I'm not going to mention all of them, but some of the ones that I think are pretty interesting or ones that I enjoy. Santa Ana Winds first started around this time, like the first recording of that. I really enjoy that song a lot. It's honestly one of my favorite from Al. Unfortunately, I think that the version that was released on Keeping the Summer Alive, the production really lets that down. I also hate how nasally Mike's part is on that. I think that really kind of stinks up the song a bit. The original version, it sounds all right. I recently listened to it just to kind of like refamiliarize myself with it. But those jarring backing vocals are still there. So I can't really say I care for either of the versions that I've heard, at least. But I do really like the song. I think it's a good melody. Brian's Back was also recorded around this time. I believe that was a Mike Love album outtake, actually. I do really like that song. Very like nice, heartfelt song. I love Carl's chorus, like they say that Brian is back. It's a really nice song. It does kind of sound like a cheesy like TV like sitcom theme song. It's kind of how I've always heard it. It kind of sounds like it was from like some like cheesy sitcom. California Feeling was also recorded around this time, and I believe it was maybe at one point considered for this album. I do like that song quite a bit. I would say it's like a total favorite of mine, but I do think it's really nice, and I would have taken it over, some of the songs that made this album, like Here Comes the Night, obviously. And then some of the other tracks that were recorded around this time, Looking Down the Coast, I really enjoy a lot. I believe that's an Al Jardine effort. Really great melody on that. I always love the part where he's like, "This must be Monterey." Da, 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 da. It's a really good melody. Brian recorded a demo around this time called I'm Begging You Please, which I really like. He didn't finish it, and the vocal is definitely rough on it. Like you can tell it's just a demo. But I think it had a lot of promise. I would have liked to see what he would have done with it. And then I also really like their version of Calendar Girl that they recorded around this time. I think it's got a lot of energy to it. I really like Mike's vocal on it, where he's like, my heart's in a whirl. I love my calendar girl. It's a really good vocal from Mike, and I really enjoy it. I would have been cool to see that as like a B-side or something. I think that would have been kind of cool. So, what do you guys think of some of the outtakes from around this time?
The main ones that I think I remember, because I don't, I'm not a big outtake listener, but I know the ones that were made in California, Brian's Back in California Feeling. So those I thought those were pretty nice, and honestly, they would have been better than some of the stuff that made it onto this album.
Yeah,
I love California Feeling. I like Al's version the best, but I feel like if they fully realized this song back in the late 70s or mid-late 70s, I feel like I would have liked that version a whole lot. It's just one that kind of sat in the vault for them and remained a bit unfinished. I think it is a really pretty song and it has lots of potential. It just wasn't fully realized. I think Calendar Girl is fucking sweet. I just wish that one had a better mix because it's super rough and it's super like grainy.
Yeah.
The best one I could find is still like maybe like a 7 out of 10 like B+ quality kind of thing. That's one I wish they fully realized. There's another one that I think they did Be My Baby around this time too, or that may have been Keeping the Summer Alive. I wish that one was also fully realized. They did a lot of cool covers around this time. Still, I think it's really cool. I think Brian's Back, and Jake described it the perfect way that it's very sitcom-y, and he gave me a really bad idea.
Oh God!
Time to test my video editing skills. Yeah, I think there's, again, with the Beach Boys, per usual, they have a lot of good stuff that's in the vault, so they just either don't finish them or just don't release them. And especially with this album, as much as I love this one, there is something missing because of that fucking 10-minute Here Comes the Night. And there's a lot of cool stuff they could have put on here, but again, just kind of one of those what ifs with the band. This is the only band where you have over 100 outtakes that are a hell of a lot better than some of the tracks they put out.
Maybe Prince too. He had a shit ton of outtakes, but he was, I think, better with choosing material.
Yeah, California Feeling is a great song. I really like the chord structure of it. The words are great by Steve Kalinich. Just the production on that specific version, I don't really like. I know it was unfinished, so it does sound very, very bare, and I don't like Bruce's section. It just sounds really weird to me. It sounds like something else should be in that spot. They should be singing something else, but um, that's my opinion. Uh, Calendar Girl is okay. It's an okay cover. Nothing too spectacular in my eyes. Brian's Back. Not really a fan of this song. Like you guys mentioned, it does sound like a sitcom song, and it's something that did really need to stay in the vault. Like it wasn't really something that needed to be released. Um, yeah, there's not a lot around this period. Not a lot.
Mike's got that cheesy, like one of those like self-references at that song. He's like, started out with fun, fun, fun. It's like, oh god.
One of those fun references.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't as bad as the fun quote in that Summer Dreams movie. That was just silly.
Wait, so you're telling me that they could have fun?
It's like they're gonna take that, they're gonna have fun until her daddy takes the T-bird away, then they go back in the city.
I'm a big defender of that first half of the movie, but I'll be honest.
No, we're talking about Summer Dreams, not American Family.
Oh, well, they did it in the American Family.
Oh, they did. I only saw American Family.
The exact same line.
Really? Because I just remember from Summer Dreams because that movie is so memeable.
No. That it was an American Family. It was like because she's gonna have fun until her daddy takes that T-bird. Because okay, the scene is they're in the car and they see a car across the street getting towed, and they're like, well, I guess she had fun till daddy takes the
T-bird.
Yeah.
Because in Summer Dreams, it's like Dennis hooks up with this girl and they go on a date, and then Mike's like, they're gonna have fun until daddy takes and then Brian's like, let's go back in the studio and record this.
One other track I wanted to mention, it wasn't an outtake because it was actually released, but it was after LA, I believe. It's a Beautiful Day was released in 1979 as well. And I really like that song. I think it's a Mike and Al composition, and I think it's really catchy. I love the energy of it. I love Carl's chorus, like the living out in LA, such a beautiful day. It's a really good vocal, and I actually listen to that song quite a bit. So also fun trivia. One of two Beach Boy songs to mention roller skating. I'm sure you can guess the other one.
Shut the fuck. Can we talk about some of the Celebration stuff too?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I think I'm the only one who likes Celebration. Clearly,
I like the Country Pie song you sent me. That was pretty. That was
yeah,
pretty.
Dude. Country Pie absolutely rips. I know the Beach Boys were actually working on that one around this time. I don't know if they were planning on releasing it because they did perform it in concert quite a few times. I think
Australia.
Yeah, I think it's a great song, and I'm surprised that they didn't. I'm actually not very surprised that they didn't release it though, because I don't see it fitting anything else. I think maybe it could have showed up on LA. I don't know if it was even done by MIU, but I think that's a Brian and Mike track, right, Justin?
No,
that's all. No, it was written by Ron
King Harvest,
wasn't it?
King Harvest.
Yeah.
Fucking kidding me?
It was on a King Harvest album, I believe. Actually,
yeah, I just looked it up. It was Eddie Toluha, however you say his name, and Ron Altbach that wrote Country Pie.
Damn, Ron Altbach has some chops in him, I guess.
Same as Winds of Change.
Yeah, so he was.
Yeah, these are the guys that wrote Winds of Change. But no, I really love Country Pie. I think that whole Celebration album is actually pretty solid, and I think it's worth a listen if you are a Beach Boys fan. Star Baby is pretty cool if you can get past the initial vocal. They call me a star. I think the song is pretty solid, and that's a Mike Love solo right, which I think is very interesting. Because I've always said that Mike Love could be a solid songwriter if he didn't have his head up his ass, you know? I think Star Baby is really cool. They did a really solid version of Getting Hungry that should not work at all, but it does. I think we already mentioned Almost Summer is pretty solid. And I feel like the Celebration album's a pretty solid release. Couple of great tracks on there, nothing really bad. And then the next year they did a disco version of California Girls, which is just as bad as Here Comes the Night, if not worse.
And that Disco Celebration album cost a pretty penny nowadays.
Yeah, there's like 500 copies, and I don't think it was ever really truly released.
Yeah.
Oh well, but yeah. So
in the warehouse, and
so Ron Outback. I just want to say he went to Cornell. So smart guy.
Smart guy. Just
they called him didn't they call him Justin? Didn't they call him like the professor or something?
Professor, yeah.
Professor, yeah.
I mean, went to Cornell. I mean, you know, if you go to an Ivy League, you gotta have some chops on you.
Country Pie and Star Baby both deserve a listen. I think absolutely. And no, Matt, that does not mean you have chops. It just means you're very technically good.
I meant chops, like as in like brains.
Oh yeah, but like doesn't mean you're like I'm sure there's plenty of people. There's thousands of people who graduate from Berkeley each year and you don't know their damn name.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, in terms of the celebration stuff, I know they have those two albums. Like they have the Almost Summer soundtrack, and then they have like just the celebration album. Like I think it's like self-titled. I really like Almost Summer, the title track. I think it's a really catchy song. I love the vocal on it from Mike, and just a really fun summer song. I can see why that was like a top 20 or top 30 hit at the time. It's really fun. From the actual like celebration album, I think I do remember liking Star Baby a bit. I thought that was kind of a fun song. As Riley mentioned, Getting Hungry disco version works way better than it has any right to, although I'm still not crazy about the chorus. There's another song on there. I think maybe one of you guys can think of it. It's a slower song. I think it's by Mike, but someone else is singing it on this one. I think it's one of the guys from King Harvest is singing it on this one. And I really like that song, but I'm trying to think what it's called.
That's Star Baby.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. That's kind of got a full vibe to it. I think Mike did that one too. So
yeah, Mike had some quality songs that he was not giving to the band. First Love.
Hey, he wanted to go solo. He wanted to go solo. So
yeah, then we heard that solo attempt.
Well, the one that came out, yeah.
Yeah,
because if you look at this time, Sumahama, despite the Japanese lyrics, Star Baby, I guess, Do You Want to Know? Maybe not like an abundance of material, but he had some quality songs.
Also, that song First Love, which made Disco Celebration. I know someone else sings on that version, but I actually really like that song, First Love. I think you said you like it too, right?
All I got from that Disco Celebration was that Justin said it was recorded. The vinyl rip was on a really bad turntable, and you could tell that the pressing was off center, which I'm like, I don't even know how you could tell that, but I guess that's how you can tell you listen to a lot of vinyl, if you can tell a pressing is off center.
Yeah, celebration stuff I haven't really listened to be honest. I've listened to the Almost Summer stuff, but not this other album. I haven't really listened to much of it. I have to be honest, the album cover scares me away. It's a terrible album cover.
Are you talking about are you talking about the self-titled where it's got Mike?
Yes.
Mike,
yeah. Yeah.
You got to listen to it though, Justin. There's some great stuff on there.
I haven't listened to it all these years because I'm scared because the album cover scares me away.
I'll send you some stuff then, Justin. I'll send you the files with no album cover attached.
Okay.
You got to hear Star Baby. You got to hear Country Pie.
And it's not like what's the word? I don't know. I find a lot of them are like really like too slick at this point. Like a lot of his stuff, it's like too slick, too like.
But melodically, it's pretty solid, especially on Country Pie and obviously Star Baby. I think those are the two ones I keep mentioning, but those are my two clear favorites from the album. They are a bit slick, but I think melodically you'll enjoy them, and there is some cool stuff, especially on Country Pie with the I don't know if it's the Rhodes, not the Rhodes, the slide guitar on it. It's pretty cool. I think that's a pretty rocking song. You'll definitely enjoy it. My dad enjoys that one, and he's a big country music guy, so that shows you something.
Yeah.
All right, so now to get into some critical reviews of the album from the time, critic reviews. So it mostly received, LA unfortunately did not really get a positive reaction from a lot of critics. A lot of them really ragged on it, especially like at the time of the album's release. Rolling Stone's Dave Marsh, he said that the Beach Boys have not made great rock music since Wild Honey, and have not made competent pop music since Holland. And he went on to say, he said the album is worse than awful. It is irrelevant. In another review from the New York Times, they said that the songs here are better than some recent albums by the group. They're gentle, tuneful, and innocently charming, but they're pretty trivial too. So kind of sounds like it's gonna be positive, but then it kind of insult there at the end. All Music, this is a later review. They said that the Beach Boys ended the decade by releasing the worst album of their career, which is such an exaggeration. They described it as yet another oddball attempt to push the Beach Boys into the contemporary mainstream, despite their many songwriting and production flaws. This one made me laugh. This one, from Blender, they said that LA was practically a self-parody, with Here Comes the Night being the only enjoyable track. So I don't know what that's about.
We're smoking something when they wrote that.
Yeah, I don't have no idea how of all the songs in there, that's the one that you say, oh, that's the good one. So I don't get that at all.
Some solid. Hey, the 70s were a wild time, man.
They were, for sure.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah. The Beach Boys biographer John Stebbins, he said some good things about this album. He said that he liked the Wilson brothers' contributions, although he did not like the songs by Mike Love and Al Jardine. So I guess he didn't like Sumahama or Lady Linda. He called the album an uneven and disappointing affair. If you liked one part of it, then you are sure to hate others, which I thought was kind of funny. I can kind of see how you could say that, just because it is kind of all over the place in terms of styles, because you got the soft rock stuff, but then you also have the disco track, the short and bread at the end. So I feel like that is kind of true. Like, you're probably going to find something you don't like on there. And then lastly, one other critic said that, or this is what's his name? Peter Ames Carlin, who's also a Beach Boys biographer, wrote the book on Bryant. He said that LA was a big improvement over MIU. The album's strength came largely from its diversity of voices. So
I just want to add things real quick.
Yeah.
You didn't see Christ Cause review, did you? C+, I quite like the electronic disco extension of Here Comes the Night, but more as an oddity than a pleasure. The chief pleasure, Brian's Good Timin', is not a new song. What is new is the pop orchestration on Lady Linda. That's his review. And I want to add one thing to the Dave Marsh thing. He started off his review by saying, the Beach Boys are easily the most overrated group in rock and roll history, which presents the reviewer with a problem. Simply stating the facts invites an overreaction from the band's maundering cult who exaggerate the Surf's Bum's importance. But the truth is that Brian Wilson was never a musical genius, though he executed some of the most crafty reworkings of Phil Spector's production style ever done, and for a few years tapped into the heart line of teenage lifestyle.
He didn't like the Beach Boys.
Well, wasn't Dave Marsh kind of a provocateur in general? Isn't he the one that called Queen a fascist band, right? I think he did.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, he did. He called them a fascist band. He also said that Led Zeppelin had an insurmountable flaw in John Bonham, who he saw as something like clinically incompetent and responsible for marring every Zeppelin album to date. So I think he just kind of was like an iconoclast.
Just on crack.
What did he call Beach Boys fans? He called them
he called them a cult that if you said anything bad about them, they would get pissed at you.
Wasn't there some line about like the surf bums? He said. I think that's what we should call it.
He said they overrate the surf bums' importance.
The surf bums. That should be our podcast name. The surf bums. There you go.
I feel like the Beach Boys fans know half of not half, but like a good chunk of our shit is shit. That's kind of the appeal for us.
As much as we love their deeper stuff, they also have that fun side, where they just have like the catchy melodies and the silly lyrics. And I feel like once you learn to appreciate that more, you can appreciate that kind of stuff more. If you embrace cheesiness a little bit more.
We're just here to have fun.
Keep in mind, though, in the 1970s, if you look at like what was like getting a lot of critical reviews, it was a lot of the more serious stuff.
Or like punk, where it's just
or like punk, and punk was very like, you look at the lyrics of punk, it was kind of like taking itself more seriously.
Yeah, like We Are the Clash.
Shut the fuck up.
I like the Clash, Riley. I just love that fucking song exists.
We are the Clash. We are the Clash.
That's their sitcom.
Are you red? ... Why?
Are you ready?
Yeah, are we good to wrap this up?
Yeah, we can wrap it up. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this 24th episode of Good Timin'. I hope you all enjoyed the show. Had a great time discussing LA and all the other outtakes and tracks from around that time. And I hope we've helped some of you listening gain a greater appreciation for this album. As we've said, I don't think it's a perfect album by any means, but I do think that there are a lot of really enjoyable songs on here that I feel deserve more recognition and attention from fans. So as always, if you like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again, everyone, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.